everybody. Welcome to a new season of our Mature Medic platform Spotlights. We have an amazing guest with us to start off the season. So welcome, Maggie. Thank you so much for your time here today. So Maggie's had an amazing career so far, starting with a degree, a master's, and alongside a writing career that you seem to have really progressed through alongside medicine, as well as literature being in your hobbies on the side. We'll hear some more about that. So thank you so much for being here. This is a new format as well for season 3. So we've had some great questions sent in by everyone in the community that we're going to answer here today with Maggie. So welcome. Anything else you'd like to tell everyone about yourself before we get started?
Hi. Hi everyone. It's great to be here. I actually enjoyed watching some of the season 2 Spotlight series myself in the past.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be a guest on one as well.
Fantastic. So if we start at the beginning, so you had an application for medicine, but then ended up on a biomedicine degree through clearing. Can you talk me through that process, if that's okay?
Yeah, so I'm Polish, and I did international baccalaureate in Poland. So when I was applying to university, obviously in October, a year before I finished, sort of same as in the UK, I applied for medicine courses and one biomedical sciences. I didn't do with the UCAT. I took it sort of in the summer, had to go all the way to Warsaw because you couldn't take it like anywhere. It was just like in the capital of Poland you were able to take it. And that was a disaster. I actually afterwards, when I got my score sheet, I went to the bathroom, I locked myself there, and I just like cried because I knew that I won't be able to apply to a lot of universities at that stage. And I went with one of my best friends. She was sitting it as well, and she was just like, it's not the end of the world. You still have BMA, BMAT, etc. You can still do it. That didn't go great either. So it was just like sort of a very small pool of universities I was able to apply. But I still did it because I was like, what else am I gonna do? So I did that. I got one interview out of the 4 applications. And that was sort of the very exciting, traveling to UK on my own for the interview. That was at Lancaster University. I loved the university. I loved like the campus, and it was a really great experience. But unfortunately, I got a rejection and I didn't get in. And it was sort of just before I was meant to start preparing for exams and all that. And I was just like, I didn't have plan B at that point. So I was just like, what am I gonna do? And I think it really impacted me back then. And I didn't really care about, the upcoming exams. And with IB, you have 6 subjects. So it was a lot of exams to do in May. And it got to I really didn't do that great. And I missed my biomedical sciences offer from Newcastle by 1 point, which was very, very ironic. But it was sort of, well, what am I going to do now? And I really wanted to stay in Poland because I wanted to be a doctor. I was like, I didn't just want to come and study in the UK. I wanted to do medicine. So, but with the exam results that I got, I wasn't able to apply for medicine. It works a bit differently. So you'll apply after your exams and when you have your results for like the following year. But yeah, it's just the situation at home, and like with my parents, they were like, you can't like stay at home and like redo the year and retook the exams, etc. So I was like, okay, if that's the case, then I'm gonna try clearing. And because IB exam results, they released in early July. So I was able to start trying to call universities and see if they have any places or if they would be willing to take me on earlier than A-level results were released. So I was quite set on East Anglia at that point, when somebody from my class who was going to study law at Lancaster said, you know what, biomedicine from Lancaster isn't clearing. You said you really like the campus and you really like, the town and all that. Why won't you, see if you can get in that? I was like, I was really on the fence because I was like, well, I imagined myself being a medical student here. How is it going to sort of be, with going there but not doing medicine? But spent whole sort of the whole clearing experience that was on the day of A-level results, had to take a day of work. And I was like, spent whole day and tons of money on like the international call from Poland, trying to get through the clearing line. And yeah, like I got through and got in, and I really enjoyed studying at Lancaster. It was a great course. The uni was great, and it was, obviously I was quite bitter at the beginning that, you know, I was in medicine, but then I was like, you know what, maybe it wasn't meant to be, maybe I'm gonna do something else. And I actually wasn't, it was somewhere at the back of my mind sort of for the whole 3 years, but I tried to take on different opportunities, and I actually started imagining myself doing something else as a career than being a doctor. And I think that really helped me, like, with being able to enjoy the course for what it was and really like enjoy myself at university, instead of like continuing to think, you know, this is not what I want to do, and just having the tunnel vision of, I really just want to go to med school after. I wasn't thinking of going to do medicine later. I thought, you know, that's it, and I'm going to just sort of make do with what I'm doing and get new opportunities.
Yeah. So we had a question actually about how you found clearing, and then did that impact how you felt starting your degree? And I feel like you've kind of answered that, and actually, because you got your results that bit earlier, you had a bit of thinking time between, and the process developed. Obviously you had to ring on the day still, and you didn't know whether you'd have that space, but you had, I suppose, a bit of time to adjust in your mind that you were going to go for another course, and actually Lancaster sounded the right one. Because I think perhaps some students, they find out on the day of results for A-levels that they haven't got their space, and they need to make that quite quick decision.
Yeah, it must be really stressful. My husband actually got into Lancaster through clearing as well. He didn't get into like with A-level results where he was meant to, and it was quite stressful. But to be honest, when you get to university, nobody really, they don't know whether you went for clearing. And even I wasn't like ashamed to say that you know, I had to go for clearing, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference once you're there. And it didn't, like, there were a lot of people in similar boats in my course that either, you know, tried to get into medicine, didn't get in, or people who wanted to do something else and it just didn't happen for them. And there were people who, like, you know, biomedicine or like biomedical sciences or like other sort of iterations of the biological sciences degree who I had lectures with. That was like the first choice, of course, and of university, but it didn't really make a difference. Like, I didn't feel any sort of less of a student or being, I don't know, deserving sort of to be there because I went for clearing. So
no, absolutely. And I think the key, what you said, is that mindset of, you know, perhaps if it wasn't your plan A, it is quite hard to change in potentially quite a short window to say, okay, this is my new plan. But saying that, okay, well, I'm here now, you know, let's make the most of it. There's some great opportunities. I can still, you know, learn a lot and have a great time. So important to then be present with the degree you're on and appreciate that, rather than, you know, perhaps spending the time thinking about that, you know, it's not your first plan. So, and is that where you met your husband, in your first degree there at Lancaster?
it is. Yes, we actually met just before uni started. He messaged me on like the freshers Facebook page. And yeah, we sort of started talking, but totally not my type. I was like, no. He picked me up from the airport and I stayed a night at his grandparents because there was like no trains going from Manchester to Lancaster. But then he took me to the train station and I was like, I hope I'm never going to see this guy again. And the first night of freshers, we were in the same college because Lancaster has college gate system as well. And yeah, the first night of freshers, like, we met again, and sort of like 2 weeks later we were together. So yeah, and that's like 10 years later now. But yeah, so you know, it's I try to like sometimes think, you know, if things like worked out differently, like my life would be very different now as well. So, and it's not saying, and it would have been easier to get into medicine, that, you know, the first try, and like would be a doctor now. And I have friends who are, you know, doing amazing things and becoming almost consultants by now. You know, it's just different, and like, but it's, I don't know, it's just, I don't feel like sad about that anymore, because you can't
Hmm.
like turn back time or like change things. So like I sort of
Hmm.
take it like, why wallow at
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So
And some really great things have come out the
yeah.
journey you've taken. So then it sounds like your undergraduate degree then became a great experience. You really enjoyed it. You said you really lent into, you know, that potential career path. At what point did you decide to do a master's?
So I that's gonna sound really stupid, but sort of mentality in Poland, where I'm from, is that you
Hmm.
don't really have higher education until you have masters. So it
Okay.
was something I always like had in my mind, and like now, obviously being older, etc., it's not sort of so clear cut, but it was
Hmm.
very as well from. It was just like something I knew I wanted to do, and I
Hmm.
enjoy studying, and I enjoy sort of broadening my horizons and all
Hmm.
sort of that. So I knew I wanted to like do like further studying.
Hmm.
And I knew I wanted to like go to Scotland as well. So I applied only to masters in Scotland.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough to get onto a course that offered, it was called Highly Skilled Workforce Scholarship. So
Hmm.
that paid the tuition fees. So I didn't have to like worry about that, which was great.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it was. I got into Edinburgh as well for was it biotechnology? I don't know. Like I think it was like some sort of
Hmm.
biotechnology, and the course looked really interesting. And Edinburgh is like my favorite city in Europe. But when I went like on the online open day, it was very. Oh, you're thinking of like working alongside, like you can't do that. It's very full on, and
Hmm.
I don't know, just Glasgow had a better vibe for me, and the course sounded
Hmm.
like more interesting towards like
Hmm.
what I was interested in. So
Hmm.
that's like ended up choosing Glasgow.
Hmm. And the title was Stratified Medicine and Pharmacological Innovation. So
Yeah.
it sounds very exciting. What kind of did it lead on from your degree? Was there particular modules in there that were
Uh,
appealing for you?
So they actually changed the name now to precision medicine. That was the first, like
Okay.
when I think that's a better, and like it gives
Okay.
people more of an overview of
Hmm.
what the course actually entails.
Hmm.
But because Stratified was like, whenever I told people that, even people from biomedicine background, they were like, "What's that?" Like I
Yeah.
don't know. So no, it was really interesting, and
Hmm.
it was sort of. It was a collaboration between different Scottish universities. So even though I was based in Glasgow, there were some people who were based in Aberdeen,
Hmm.
and it was really sort of harnessing the like the strengths of other universities. So like when we had biostatistics, it was with a lecturer from Dundee. When we had like biobusiness and like enterprise module, that
Hmm.
we actually went to Strathclyde University for that, because the business school is amazing. So it
Hmm.
was just very. Then we had like ethics module from Edinburgh as well. So like. I would have to
Hmm.
double check, but I actually think that on
Hmm.
my degree certificate, it says that I like graduated from Glasgow, Aberdeen, and Edinburgh, I think. So
Okay.
it was
Okay.
very sort of
Hmm.
collaborative. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was really interesting. I think the best part and most interesting part for me were the clinical trials. And what was also really appealing for me was the fact that the master's dissertation, you got to spend like 3 months in industry doing sort of like
Okay.
an internship and project
Hmm.
like outside university. And at that point, I was actively thinking of actually working in like pharmaceutical company or
Hmm.
biotechnological company, like as in a lab. So being able to have that experience and see how it looks like, it was helpful, and that was like
Hmm.
sort of what swayed my decision to like apply for that particular degree.
Okay. And that experience you had at that point in time, did that experience then say, okay, this is something I'm really going to think about? Or did your experience then make you think, actually, is medicine still for me? Where was your head at the time?
So medicine was like a strange one, because even though, as I said, I was trying to like enjoy other opportunities and like
Mm-hmm.
get it out of my head, it was mainly because I didn't think it's gonna ever happen, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought, like, what's the point of thinking about it if it's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna happen? Because sort of in my head, it was only people who had a lot of like financial support from the family were able to like do
Mm-hmm.
medicine. second degree.
Mhm.
I needed to like get a part-time job that was back in Lancaster sort of as soon as I could. And I ended up getting a job as a nurse auxiliary at a nursing home,
Mhm.
because I volunteered in a hospice and I did quite a lot of that as sort of a run up to medicine application back in
Mhm.
Poland. So I had quite a bit of experience with that. And yeah, and then I sort of got another one as a care assistant, and that was the job. Again, as I got into masters, I knew I needed a job. That was like my priority, so I started applying
Mhm.
even before we actually moved to Glasgow, into another care home.
Mhm.
And like interacting with residents and being sort of in that environment, like there were a lot of times that I kept thinking, you know, this is something I really would like to do, but
Mhm.
I just thought it's not going to happen. So the moment when I sort of was like, well, maybe, maybe I will try was, when I was finishing my master's. I actually didn't enjoy working in the lab at all. Like during
Yeah.
those 3 months, I
Okay.
was looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
then I was like, it's not for me. Like if it was a part of
Mhm.
the job, then
Mhm.
it would be fine if it was like leading to something else. But just work, like it just was not for me. I felt very isolated. I'm quite an outgoing person, and
Mhm.
I like working with other people. I like working as part of the team, and I felt very
Mhm.
sort of lonely working in the lab.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at that point, I was just like applying furiously for full-time jobs, and it was a
Mhm.
bit. It wasn't at that point like what I wanted to do. It was just like I need any job that I can get
Mhm.
my foot in the door. And I was also applying for PhDs at the same time.
Mhm.
So I got into a PhD program at St Andrews, and sort of a day later, I got the job offer to like for associate medical writer, and it was
Mhm.
like what? And at that point, I was like, I think I want to try to get into medical school, and I knew that if I'm gonna
Mhm.
do a PhD, I wouldn't have it in me to spend another like
Yeah.
5 years at
Mhm.
university. So that was it. Like that made sort of the decision for me. So yeah, that's like why I started working, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm
Mhm.
gonna start looking into what can I do to get
Mhm.
into medical school as a
Mhm.
graduate.
Mhm. And how accessible did you find that information? Because I know a lot of people find it a bit of a minefield in terms of, especially once you're a graduate, I suppose, with a science background, that perhaps is an easier route. But again, we said finances can be a big challenge, and location then becomes a much bigger factor. I think once you've spent some time living in different places. But how did you find that process?
So when I was doing my master's, Dundee and St Andrews announced that they're opening ScotGem.
Mhm.
So that was back in 2017, I
Mhm.
think. Yeah, it was 2017. So
Mhm.
I went to Dundee Medical School for an open day, and
Mhm.
I thought, sort of found out a lot about like the process of applying from there.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and that's sort of when I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to like do higher chemistry, because
Mhm.
my chemistry higher level from IB wasn't like a good enough
Mhm.
result. And I was like, okay, don't really fancy doing that alongside working full time, etc. But I
Mhm.
signed up to like a local college to do night classes. But then it was just like more and more hoops to jump over. So they
Mhm.
told me I would have to do IELTS, even though even when I was applying to medicine from Poland because I had IB, nobody asked me for that. But I was like,
Mhm.
whatever. I have 2 degrees from like I don't even have to do it when I will be applying for British citizenship. But they're like, you have to do IELTS. I was like, okay, whatever, I will do it. But
Mhm.
like the bottom line was when they said I would have to do like national five maths. I was like, I'm sorry, like
Okay.
it was just too much. And
Mm.
I was like,
Okay.
the whole idea of jumping around, I mean, it's a great course. I have a friend who did it and she really really enjoyed it. She's working now as an FY1,
Mhm.
and she loved the course, and I'm sure it's amazing, but for me it was just not really sustainable to jump through all those hoops. And
Mhm.
sort of then I started like, I lived in Glasgow anyway, so I just went on the Glasgow website and I was like,
Mhm.
you don't really have a lot of choice when you live in Scotland and you're classed as Scottish student. You don't really get a
Mhm.
lot of choice what you can do if you
Mhm.
can't afford paying for tuition fees down in England yourself.
Hmm.
So I wasn't really able to apply to um, graduate entry medicine like in Newcastle and like everywhere else.
Yeah.
So that really narrows down your choices. You can only
Hmm.
really apply to Glasgow, Edinburgh, St Andrews, Dundee, or Scotland, or Aberdeen, and that's it.
Hmm. Yeah, because I think, especially with your kind of nursing assistant care home like experience, places like Warwick, I feel like you'd have had a really
Yeah,
strong application because you'd have had the hours, but you're balancing all the different factors, funding, financial, and location as well. Once you've lived in a city or an area for a while, you don't necessarily want to relocate. Um, Okay, so you felt that the information was out there, but the requirements perhaps were being asked were varied between some places actually wanting you to do, chemistry, math,
yeah.
and you said IELTS. Is that just to
IELTS,
clarify what that is?
it's a English language test.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a bit silly at that stage because, as I
Yeah.
said, even when I was applying initially to university, because I had my whole education in English since I was
Hmm.
16, so I was just
Yeah.
like, anyway, but it was just like I sort of treated it as just like another hoop, but like the math
Hmm.
was too much, and not as in terms of I wouldn't pass it. It was a lot of faff, and I was like,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
don't want to do it that much, and I didn't have a guarantee of getting in either.
Hmm.
So that was like another thing. But
Yeah.
it is a really good course, and if you can meet the requirements, and
Mm.
a lot of people are, I'm sure if you did like good in chemistry. I don't actually know what the requirements are just now because I didn't apply there in
Hmm.
the end. But yeah, it's a great course, and if you can meet
Hmm.
the requirements, then that's awesome. But it was just not for me.
Yeah. I think as well, something that can be shared between more mature students is you build up all this experience, and it still comes down to kind of small check boxes
Yeah.
of your UCAT score. Do you have maths level 5? You're like, I've got a master's, or could have a place on a PhD. The kind of, you feel that you don't get seen as this whole person with all your experiences and skills that you have available. It's still then reduced down to, well, actually, you haven't got this qualification, let alone you could actually, show superseded education level beyond that. It's still, you have to meet those checkboxes, which I think can be a huge frustration, as you're not showcasing everything you have on offer, because you're like, why are you worried about maths level 5? And I could bring so
Yeah.
much to the course, and I've got care experience, and
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree, and I think a lot of time, you get universities saying a lot that they want to, have very diverse
Hmm.
student body, and they want to get like people from different backgrounds because it actually helps the patients later on if you have like more
Hmm.
varied workforce and
Hmm.
doctors from other backgrounds. But really there's like so much still to be done in terms of
Hmm.
actually properly widening participation to
Hmm.
medicine for
Hmm.
people, and making it more accessible if you
Hmm.
don't just tick boxes and you're not just like
Hmm.
sort of, I don't know, like a normal applicant
Hmm.
who's 18, 17, 18 and
Hmm.
just like flew through school with flying
Hmm.
colors.
Yeah, and I get there's challenges in terms of, a lot of people apply for medicine. It's a very time and cost,
Yeah.
process to go through the applicants and select them. So I appreciate the challenges, but on the other side of it, it does feel like there's a gap missing, especially when they say that they are looking for, this variety of candidates. That, yeah, the application process does not facilitate selecting for those people and making the course accessible for them to apply to. So, um, well, a new agenda for Mature Medic platform will take on application policy. So you said at that point you had the option for going for a PhD, but then you took a medical writer job. So what does, for people that aren't familiar with that sort of role, what does it entail?
I keep being told 6 years later, still doing
Mhm.
it, that I explain it very badly. So I initially applied as an editorial assistant to this
Mhm.
company, and it's medical communications. It's sort of like it's a huge industry that not many people know about, but
Mhm.
essentially there's like you get branches that like help with publications, for example. So a lot of the research
Mhm.
and like a lot of journal articles that is published, actually, if you go down in acknowledgement section, it says
Mhm.
like that the company, for example, pharma company, paid for like writing support by so
Okay.
and so from this medcoms
Mhm.
agency, and
Mhm.
with the whole sort of principles of like how the good publishing practice and all that, GPP, the authors, so the actual like doctors and key opinion leaders, they have to like have be heavily involved in writing, but the
Mhm.
actual sort of writing and trying to submit it to journals, and often like trying to coordinate it all because they're all so busy,
Mhm.
falls into medical like communications agency. So that's like
Mhm.
one sort of branch, but I've actually never worked in PABs. I've always worked in medical affairs.
Mhm.
So that involves working with pharmaceutical companies, biotechnological companies, sometimes patient advocacy groups, which is a very interesting bit of work as well.
Mhm.
And depending on sort of account and therapy area that you're working on, like initially I worked on immuno-oncology,
Mhm.
and that was doing a lot of like slide decks and scientific narratives, so very sort of content heavy decks that were like having everything about like specific tumor types for that
Mhm.
company. And it was, all the sort of natural history, like all the data from all the trials, the competitors, you do
Mhm.
competitor landscapes as well, meetings where you work with trying to get let's say a pharmaceutical company wants to like run a phase 3 trial of the new drug, and they want to get opinions of like experts in the field to see whether the primary and like secondary endpoints that
Mhm.
they selected are actually representative of like the patient population and all that.
Mhm.
So that's called advisory boards, and you
Mhm.
get people in, and then you write the reports.
Mhm.
It's a lot of different stuff. Like recently I've been working on getting a new medical education's website up and running,
Mhm.
like the content
Okay.
for that,
Yeah.
some sort of long-term data with like competitor and company's own information slide deck.
Mhm.
It's some webinars as well. Like it's
Mhm.
usually like sort of work with medical information,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's just like a lot of variety, like going to
Yeah.
congresses and sort
Mhm.
of getting it all, like insights, for example, from medical science liaisons, because I work at the moment for US companies. So like in the US, they have like MSL team who go to different doctors, and they want to like gather insights on
Mhm.
what's happening with their patients and like how
Mhm.
they're tolerating the drug and all
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
trying to distill it all into a report. But
Mhm.
that's a very lengthy summary because I still
Yeah.
have to like work on trying to explain it in more simple terms. But
Yeah.
it's essentially just like working with pharma companies and trying to
Mhm.
like translate sort of complex sciences into
Mhm.
data that you can, like into meaningful information.
Mhm.
And a lot of my colleagues work with, I recently worked on a patient deck as well for a patient meeting. So that was
Mhm.
interesting, trying to like get it to like more plain language that patients will
Mhm.
understand.
Mhm.
So yeah, a lot of variety,
Yeah.
and it probably sounds a lot
Yeah.
more interesting than it is, but it's
No, not at all. And I think, especially, there's so many jobs out there, and the job title just doesn't do justice to what the job entails. And until you know about it and find out about it, you have no idea. Naively, writing, I imagined sitting there just writing, but actually there's a huge amount to the process. And it sounds like a lot of skills that are really valuable in medicine in general, generally taking information that can be quite inaccessible, and complex, and then being able to translate that, for patient populations. So yeah, hugely valuable in that sense.
yeah, you get a lot of, I know quite a few doctors turned medical writers in my
Hmm.
company
Hmm.
decided they don't want to work anymore on like the clinical
Hmm.
side. So that's also very sort of valuable. I'm actually hoping, fingers crossed, depending on what specialty I choose as well, I'm hoping to sort of continue working in some sort of consulting freelance capacity in that sort of industry, because of my experience in the future as well. And I think being able to like know two sides is going to be very valuable. So I'll see what the future sort of holds. But I initially didn't even apply for associate medical writer role. I applied to be an editorial assistant at that company, and I had a call with HR, and they were like, "Oh, you actually sound like, you know, your background, etc., sounds like a lot more suited for associate medical writing job. Like, would you be interested in applying for that?" And she was like, "I can put your application through for editorial assistant," which was more of like project managing sort of everything, and like calling authors, like calling doctors who were authors on papers and all sort of that. And I was like, "What's that?" I had no idea, because majority of medical writers, they have PhDs, and very often they have like a few years as a postdoc, and often it's, for example, like as I said, doctors as well who don't want to like practice anymore, and they start working in medical communications afterwards. But I was like, "Okay, you know, sure." She's like, "I will send you a test, and then we can sort of see." So I've done the test, and I assume it went well, because they invited me for an interview where I had 2 more tests to do. And I got the job. But yeah, it was like, I was like so thrilled that I got the job that I even didn't even ask what sort of the salary was. Like, it was sort of an afterthought. And thinking back to it now, it seems like so, like, you know, naive, etc. But I just like, I knew I needed to get a job, and I finished the placement at that biotech company where I did my master's dissertation on a Friday, and I started the job on a Monday, so I had like no break. But it was good. Like, learned a lot. It was tough at the beginning, because trying to learn all those ropes, it was like overwhelming. But yeah, I'm now in like a different company. Actually started this job, well, before med school it was full time, just before lockdown in 2020. So that was interesting as well, and I'm really grateful that we were able to sort of work out an arrangement that you know works and is flexible to like sort of still, so I can still do the job whilst in medical school, because I wouldn't be able to afford to be in medical school otherwise.
And I think we'll come back to that in a bit when we talk about kind of challenges of studying alongside part-time working. So you're working full-time. At what point did you then start to actually apply for medicine again, and how was that process?
So I started working in 2017. That was end of August. I knew that I wouldn't be able to like apply that. I just didn't have time to prepare for UCAT. So I was like, I already knew at that point I would want to apply to medicine. So I started, you know, looking at all the different UCAT resources. I looked at all the sort of entry requirements from different universities, and particularly Glasgow, because I went to their open day as well, and I already lived in Glasgow, and it was just super convenient, so to say. And I like my sort of like when I wanted to do UCAT was 2018, so I was like sort of preparing for that. I took UCAT in 2018, and it didn't go great, and I already knew sort of that Glasgow has like a specific cutoff, and they really UCAT heavy, and that was like my priority. Like, if I was going to apply, I wanted to at least be able to get a shot at an interview in Glasgow. I didn't want to apply with a UCAT where I knew it's gonna, like, I didn't see the point in that. So I got, I don't even know, it was something like 2,460. Like, it was very, very low. So I was like, okay, you know, first I was like, doesn't matter, I don't need to do that, you know, like it just not meant to be. But I'm very stubborn, so the next year I tried again. That was 2019. It went better than the last time, but it was still too low. It was like just over like 100 points higher, so still under 2,600. And then COVID hit, and sort of everything changed, and UCAT was online from home, like being monitored, etc. That was so stressful, because I was like, what if something, you know, doesn't work, and all that. But that was like my first time, and I also told myself at that point that if I don't manage to like do it and apply and get in by the time I'm 30, I'm just not gonna do it, because I was like,
Okay.
there's no point in trying
Hmm.
to push and push. I was like, I needed to like set myself, for my sanity, I needed to set myself like
Hmm.
a target that, okay, I'll try up until this point, and then I will just sort of,
Hmm.
I tried, but it didn't work out, and
Yeah.
I will move on with my life. But I got to 750 at
Wow.
that point in 2020, and
Hmm.
I knew based on like I was watching the cut like previous year cut-offs in Glasgow very closely, and I knew that would be basically enough to sort of guarantee me an interview, because the way,
Hmm.
and a lot of people are like, oh, they don't like it's a tick box, like if
Hmm.
you have to meet the minimum requirements, but then they like put everybody, sort
Yeah.
of rank everybody's UCATs, and like they draw a line at like 800 or something, might be more now, but
Hmm.
I think the space is increased, but that's it, and you get invited
Hmm.
to an interview. And
Hmm.
I was like hoping that if I can manage that, then I can like fly through interview.
Hmm.
So I applied then. I applied to Glasgow, Aberdeen, Edinburgh, and Dundee. I wasn't
Hmm.
able to apply to St Henry's because too much time had passed since my last degree,
Hmm.
and it was sort of the same to Edinburgh, and I got rejected like pre-interview, but I sort of
Hmm.
expected it. I just was like, oh, I don't want to. When you have like you can choose like four,
Yeah.
and it was like,
Yeah.
so anyway,
Mm.
got the pre-interview rejection from Dundee as well, but I got interviews at Glasgow and Aberdeen, and I
Hmm.
got offers from both.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got the Aberdeen offer, I was just like getting into the flat. I was like opening the door, and the
Hmm.
email came, and I sort of like stopped, and I
Yeah.
checked my phone,
Hmm.
and I started crying. But at first, it was like such happy tears because I got 10. But then I was like, oh my god, what are we gonna do? Like, how am I gonna go to
Hmm.
Aberdeen?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was sort of that.
Hmm.
So, and then my husband tried to be like, but you got into med school, you're going to med school, and I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, but how?
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
the Glasgow offer came a bit later, like a
Hmm.
lot later. I didn't
Hmm.
think it's gonna happen because yeah, they said they're gonna tell everybody by end of March, and
Hmm.
I sent an email on 1st of April to
Oh
admissions,
my
and I was
gosh.
like,
Yeah.
oh, so does it mean that I didn't get in? I just
Hmm.
need sort of a closure and an answer. And I got an email back saying that, oh, we're running a bit behind, but
Hmm.
all decisions should be like sent this week. You actually should hear from us like soon today.
Hmm.
Like,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was
How
like,
about now? Yeah.
so it was 1st of April, and when I like called everybody and say I got into Glasgow, I had to like be like, it's not April Fools, it actually happened. So it
Yeah.
was, yeah, I think we had like two bottles of champagne. It was like
Yeah.
very happy day,
Hmm.
and sort of very long in the making. So yeah.
Yeah. And of a lot of work and a lot of, moments where, okay, maybe I'm not quite there yet. And the kind of in your mind, the decision of saying, this is really the last time I'm going to try. Yeah, it's a big moment. And did you get the usual email where you've been told your UCAT's been updated, but you don't know the decision? Because I thought that's a particularly cruel way to share the news, because
Uh,
you've got to try and log on to your UCAT.
I think it was an email from Glasgow
Okay.
themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was driving, and my husband sort of checked the phone, and he's like, you got in. And I was just like, sort of like sitting there, and I'm like, good, about time. It was literally that. I applied for the third entry as well. So I think because they were taking
Hmm.
such a, like, I already knew I wanted to like start in 2022. And
Hmm.
that was like 2020, 2021
Hmm.
application cycle. So I think they might have been waiting longer, because my interview
Yeah,
was in December. So that was, such a long wait from
a long time.
mid-December to 1st of April, but all like sort of all forgiven.
Yeah, all worth it in the end. And
Yeah.
then I don't know how you found, but on the first day you're suddenly there, and everything just kind of melts away before, and kind of the whole process of getting there, and you're started, and then suddenly you'll be qualifying as a doctor. So we just had a couple of questions from people specifically about the UCAT. I know it is a major thing for lots of people applying. Just are you able to talk through a little bit about what resources you did use and what you found helpful?
What is this platform called? Now I can't remember the name.
Hmm.
There's an online platform that
Hmm.
I used. I think it was a paid platform.
Is it Medify, perhaps?
Yes,
Yes.
that's it. Yes, I used
Yes.
Medify a lot, and I only
Hmm.
used it for sort of my last attempt. I didn't use it before.
Hmm.
I tried like to. I had books, and I tried to do like books and other things,
Hmm.
and I watched like people on YouTube, like, saying
Hmm.
what they sort of like used and trying to go for questions and all that. Um, but I yeah, I just struggled with the speed that the
Hmm.
time limit in
Hmm.
UCAT. That was what was getting me a lot. Like I was able to do all those questions. It was
Hmm.
just the sort of the time pressure, and
Hmm.
I also have anxiety disorder, so sort of like the
Hmm.
working under pressure, like often
Yeah.
it's like it works out, but with you, I don't know, it was just it's not really the way that like my brain works, so I found it
Hmm.
really, really challenging. But it's not really any secret to that, like, yeah, like, I know there are people who get like over 3,000 and it's awesome
Hmm.
for them, but it's not a test that like determines whether you're like intelligent or whether you're gonna
Hmm.
do great in med school. I
Yeah.
know that there's lots of research that's like, oh, if you do well in UCAT, it predicts sort of doing well in medical school, and that's what the why
Hmm.
they use it, etc. But yeah, Medify, and just sort of not trying to obsess too much. Like I found it
Hmm.
much more helpful to do sort of like less questions through a longer period of time and the run up
Hmm.
to UCAT than trying to like sit, I don't know, like 4 6 hours a day and just like
Hmm.
trying to stare at the computer and doing questions.
Hmm.
And I also like the day before UCAT, and I sort of like learned that already from all of my exams. I try not to look at anything and just like try to
Hmm.
like switch off and relax. And
Yeah. Hmm.
it's because that it was such a difference as well to when I was doing UCAT now to how it was when I was 18 and I cried in that like bathroom and that
Hmm.
exam center in Warsaw. Because it back then it felt like a literal end of the world. Like like what am I gonna do with my life? Like my life is finished. I'm so stupid. But
Hmm.
then sort of like being older, it's a bit like like there's other things, like it's not the end of the world. Like you can like move past it. It's just a test. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't change who you are, and it doesn't really mean much. So
Hmm.
I think that was very helpful for me, just to like put it in
Hmm.
a perspective that there's like worse things happen, like
Yeah.
than that, and you can take it again. And there's if you can do the GAMSAT and you can apply to
Yeah.
universities, that the GAMSAT, that's another
Hmm.
exam
Yeah.
as well. And I was lucky because there was a point when I was like, I'm gonna do that stupid chemistry, maths, etc. And I was trying applying to Scotland
Yeah.
because they the
Yeah.
GAMSAT. So yeah, it's you can obviously like it's a very difficult test from what I gathered, but you
Hmm.
can, I don't know, like if you're somebody who likes to feel a bit more prepared, because you can't really study for you, because you can do the test and you can sort of like familiarize yourself with like the questions, but you can't.
Hmm.
There's nothing you can really like study and learn.
Hmm.
Um, so some people just do better in GAMSAT, and that would, the UCAT. I just knew that if I wanted to like stay in Glasgow and go to Glasgow,
Hmm.
which was the most like feasible option for me and my circumstances, then I would have to get certain score in
Hmm.
UCAT, and it was just what it
Yeah.
was.
And showcasing, as you said, that good old stubborn streak of I'm going to do this, I'm going to come back again, I'm going to keep working at it, and the perseverance, it does pay off. Um, so that brings us to um, you're at Glasgow, you're studying medicine. How has that been? Has it been what you thought it would be?
Um, I like it's always like when you start, it's like, oh, it's going to be so amazing, and it's a
Hmm.
really good course, and like the curriculum, it's Glasgow has a spiral curriculum that I didn't really appreciate until this year, when we sort of like
Hmm.
start going back to topics we like touched on in
Hmm.
first year, but we're adding a lot more depth to it and going
Hmm.
back, like we're doing, for example, second year of like renal at the
Hmm.
moment, and we did like a week about kidneys and renal
Hmm.
last year as well. And it's sort of like you're not seeing things for the first time. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I know that this is making connections. So I really like, sort of in terms of how interesting it is and how
Hmm.
good like the lectures and the content is,
Mm-hmm.
it is how I sort of hoped. Like it's very, very
Mm-hmm.
well run course in that respect. Obviously not everything is amazing. I wasn't sure how I'm going to feel about PBL, for
Yeah.
example, because Glasgow has PBL.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm gonna like grow to like it more. I'm not really a fan. I've never had like a bad
Mm-hmm.
group or anything, but I don't like that way of learning. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's like sort of just like a thing that I
Mm-hmm.
get on with and I have to get through. Some
Yeah.
people really love it, so it really
Mm-hmm.
depends on sort of
Mm-hmm.
how you study.
Mm-hmm. And
But
just for people that don't know, PBL, that's problem-based learning. And there's also case at Bristol, it's CBL, so case-based
yeah,
learning. I don't think I understand the difference potentially between the two, but I think there's slight differences, but it's like a group learning that's quite independently led, and you have a so do you still have a case, or is it a problem?
no, so you get a scenario.
Sorry,
You get a
okay.
scenario, and you sort of like we do it like in 2 hour sessions. So
Hmm.
last year was on a Monday, which I hated because you
Hmm.
sort of like try to squish it all into a weekend, all the prep. Now we have it on a Friday, which I think is much better. But you get like the first sort of hour is just a feedback session from like last week. So it's sort of
Yeah.
what you learned about like
Hmm.
last week, etc. As a group, you spend
Hmm.
an hour discussing and like answering the questions and like
Hmm.
drawing diagrams and all sort of that mind maps. Then the next hour is you get a new sort of scenario and you
Hmm.
brainstorm that, and it's like you're not meant to like use any sort of you're not meant to have like laptops, iPads, anything sort of. It's just sort of based on your
Hmm.
like I don't know, a hunch and your
Hmm.
pre-existing knowledge, etc.
Hmm.
And then you generate as a group questions at the end, like of
Hmm.
the brainstorming session, and you go away with those questions and you like research it, whatever you like, learn the answers and like
Hmm.
find out things, and then the next week you
Yeah.
feed that back. So that's the first 2 years. CBL at Glasgow is in first 15 weeks in third year.
Okay.
Um, so obviously I haven't done that yet, but like
Yeah.
yeah, I assume it might be a bit more clinical focused than
Okay.
like with
Hmm.
PBL. It's a lot of like, and the first sort of 2 years at Glasgow, it's very like focusing on like the normal, like what's
Hmm.
normal and like the
Hmm.
normal function, and
Hmm.
only then you're adding on like to what's like what can go wrong, etc.
Hmm.
But CBL and like those first 15 weeks in year three are starting to be a lot more clinical.
Yeah.
So that's like what I think as well was a bit of a bummer, that those first 2 years at Glasgow are
Hmm.
quite dry. You don't get a lot
Hmm.
of, you don't get like early clinical contact.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's something that really uh, gives me motivation and sort of keeps me interested. So like when
Hmm.
we had 2 hospital visits last year,
Hmm.
and we went to ED, emergency department, and gastroenterology ward,
Hmm.
and I enjoyed like both of those. But I'm also somebody who like studies better and learns better sort of on her feet, and
Hmm.
like seeing something in action and
Hmm.
somebody showing me something, etc., than sitting with textbooks. So that's like I'm sort of sitting now and being like, I just like really want to get to the point where placement starts, and I think that's
Hmm.
gonna like I'm waiting for that. But
Hmm.
it's nothing really like with Glasgow as Glasgow. Like I am happy that I chose it as a course and I ended up
Hmm.
going here. We get dissections as well. We actually had the last dissection in medical school this
Oh
week.
wow. Yeah.
Um, so I get both dissections and prosections.
Hmm.
Which I think is it's a very privileged position to be able to, to do a
Hmm.
dissection and like learn from a body and
Hmm.
a donor. So yeah, there's just a lot of variety. The way it works after COVID now with Glasgow as well, we get a lot of we get face-to-face classes, but we also
Hmm.
get like quite a lot of online content to do
Hmm.
like within a
Hmm.
week in your supposedly free time.
Hmm.
It's sort of you have to manage your time, which quite like it's blended learning. I think probably quite a
Yeah.
few universities
Hmm.
do it now, that they found that after COVID some things were working better online than
Yeah.
in person. So we still get
Hmm.
some lectures face to face, but there's so many of us in the year that they have to split it into two.
Oh wow.
So they run the
Yeah.
same lecture twice, like when they
Okay.
have it in person.
Yeah.
And you still get like all the clinical sessions are in person,
Hmm.
vocational studies are in person,
Hmm.
all the labs, sort of dissections, etc. But you get quite a lot of stuff to do online on your own as well.
Hmm.
So I think that is something that like I'm happy with that, but I think a lot of people who maybe are used to a bit more guided learning, especially
Hmm.
I noticed that when I speak to some people who came straight from school, that
Hmm.
they struggled with like organizing their time to like fit everything in.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds quite similar, I think, to Bristol, and it's quite independent led, and I felt like there was a fair amount of flexibility to organize my own schedule, which I think ties in quite nicely with managing part-time work alongside. So that sounds like it would be quite helpful in terms of organizing your own schedule and managing part-time work. Do you find you kept the both quite separate in times of your day, or did you blend your work kind of within your studying day, or how did it work for you?
So what I do is like I sort of kept the same job title and everything and the same
Hmm.
client and everything as I had before
Hmm.
medical school. And because I was quite senior at work, like, and I still am like editorial lead on the account I'm on,
Hmm.
I sometimes get days I have like work phone and I have to take it sometimes to campus with me and like check
Hmm.
messages or even like call people in between
Hmm.
lectures, or even if I'm at the library, I have to like step out
Hmm.
and make a call. I try to keep it separate, and like my colleagues are absolutely amazing and like really being supportive. You know, like
Hmm.
I have sort of I work Monday to Friday, so I don't work the weekends at the moment.
Hmm.
But like trying to work every day because it sort of
Hmm.
helps with keeping things running, and it breaks it up more as well, because if I like when I was working as a care assistant during like my bachelor's and
Hmm.
my master's, it was doing like 12-hour shifts, and it was like a long, that was like your whole day, you couldn't
Hmm.
really do anything else in
Hmm.
it. And now I'm working 18 hours a week,
Hmm.
and it's spread like from Monday to Friday.
Hmm.
And there is like flexibility with that if I have like a client call, etc. I think what works for me, and this is such a unique situation that it's probably not super helpful for older people to
Hmm.
hear, but like because I work with the US company and US clients,
Hmm.
the fact that I, for example, log on at like 4 or 5 o'clock and I work through
Hmm.
the evening, it doesn't really matter that much because they
Yeah.
still online.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's helpful in that respect. And I've been like helping on like some like with UK colleagues as well recently, and the
Hmm.
fact that I can do it in the evening and then they can look at stuff in the morning, that's been like helpful as well in that
Hmm.
respect. I do try to like switch it, like I keep Saturdays off because it's so full on during a week for me. So like on Saturday there's like no working and no studying for me, and there is like sort of with exams looming, it's very like you're tempted to like, well, I'm only going to look at this or I'm going to do those
Hmm.
flashcards or something. But I think it's important to like still keep that time away where you can
Hmm.
really recharge and just like have a day without thinking, oh my god, like what's the function of this or that.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and because my work as well is very like sciencey, and like I read so many papers at work, and
Hmm.
it's not doing something else. Like
Hmm.
I sometimes speak to people who have a job like during medical school, but they work in a coffee shop or something, and they say they
Hmm.
really enjoy the interaction and they enjoy it because they can like sort of switch off from thinking about
Yeah.
medicine, etc.
Yeah.
So my job isn't like that, and it has like benefits
Hmm.
and disadvantages to it. But yeah, I think it's quite a unique situation. I'm just like really happy that I was able to work out an arrangement with the company, because
Hmm.
I don't think I don't think a lot of people would be like, would just be like, okay, well, then you can quit or something. And
Hmm.
it's been really good. Like I honestly can't complain about it. It's been awesome, and the clients have been so supportive and lovely
Hmm.
as well. So that's like
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
thing. Like one of my clients keeps like, we have weekly status calls with them every Wednesday, and like whenever he comes on before we start talking about projects, etc. It's like, oh, how's the med school going, Maggie?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's just been really really nice. I know I won't be able to continue working the way I'm working when we
Hmm.
start clinical placement, so that's And that's something that's been really stressing me out. So for the next year and like the next 3 years, basically. But I'm still hoping I can sort of, I don't know, say that I have 6 or 7 hours, or like do less hours, but like do it over the weekend. The contract that I'm on, like I can do that as well. So we'll see, but not having those like client facing responsibilities, just like getting a brief from, somebody else and being like, work on this slide, like for example, like you have 7 hours for that, or do a data check on something and things like that. So hoping that I can work that into at least like the third year. But it is hard, because I think as well, what, like for me, the fact that I wanted to do medicine for such a long time, and now I'm medical school, and there's like a lot of things when I study, it's not like, oh, I have to learn this. I'm really interested in most things, obviously, like some things more than others. Like we had GI block, and I'm interested in GI and gastroenterology. So that was giving me like then embryology or renal, etc. So, it depends. Obviously, you can't like everything, but it's, for me, the big thing is that I would like to spend more time on studying and, like doing extra reading and just doing other things. I can't do that just with like the time management. I sort of have to, I had to like make peace with the fact that, I won't be the person who's going to be like top of my class, which I don't really care about. And it's absolutely fine. But also sort of letting myself be, okay, this is as much as you can do. You can't learn everything about, like you just can't do it. So that was like a big thing for me, that it was like, this was like my dream, and now I'm here, and I just don't have time and capacity to like fully sort of give my full attention to this. So that's a big thing, I think, for me.
I think a lot of people, especially mature medics, or any medic that has to work alongside, especially if you're so excited about being there and you think, I'd love to look into more of this or take up this opportunity, but then actually the time is just not there to take advantage of it. And I think you said kind of, I suppose, make peace or come to peace with that. And it can be a frustrating process to go through when I've spent years getting to this place, and actually, perhaps not being able to fully immerse yourself in it. It's quite a hard thing, I think, to take, and it's compromising on what you need to do to maintain your place there, whether that's financially or if you have caring responsibilities, or and I think it's something that isn't talked about as much.
Yeah, absolutely. And even things like societies, and I don't mean like societies where you just like go and party or something, but like there's so many like interesting medical school societies in Glasgow. And like there's like one that I was super interested in, like about like wilderness medicine, that they did like awesome sessions, and I tried like signing up for that last year, but it just doesn't work out with sort of what I did. And we had now somebody from Street Doctors coming into our lecture, like giving a talk about that. I was like, that sounds so cool. And like my sort of first instinct is like, oh, I really want to do it, and then I'm like, I can't, because I don't have the time. So that's sort of a lot of the times, like I had people who are like, oh, let's do like study session, and it's like, I can't, I have to like go back home and I have to work. It's it is like you said, compromising, but it's, if you want to like stay, like it just wouldn't work out otherwise. Like I know I could like get another job or something, but I wouldn't be able to get a job that pays as well as my current, like it's sort of like something got to give. And that's like the societies was like the easy one, and I'm like, well, maybe in third or fourth year, when I can like work a bit less, I can do something. But it wasn't, I just won't be able to do it at the moment. And it was a tough one, because then you see like all the photos, you have like a bit of like FOMO, like that fear of missing out, and you see like just people from your year having fun and doing like great things, or like saying, oh, we're going for this session, or we're doing something or other, and you're like, I can't. So it is it's not great. It's not a great feeling. And I sometimes like think, oh, if I only like, I don't know, won like X amount of money, not like a millions or something, but just like
Yeah,
just enough to
yeah.
be able to like get me like through med school without working, that would be like a dream. Like I wouldn't quit med school, I would still do it. It just
Hmm.
wouldn't be wouldn't be like as hard as it is at the
Yeah.
moment. But
Hmm.
you know,
And I think medicine generally as a career, there is, and I'm sure it's many careers, but there's so many opportunities are going to be presented your way to take on this project or this extracurricular. And you do, I think, just have to be wary of your time. And then I suppose it's just the things that you do allocate. You've got to enjoy those. And then you've got to think, what do I need to do? And then if my time is tight, is this how I want to spend my time? So yeah, I think it's going to be a career long challenge of managing all the opportunities. But like you said, it's when you have to do it to
yeah.
stay on the course is the frustration.
I think though, like, and that's like another thing as well. Don't know whether it's like a thing everywhere else, but like at Glasgow, everybody seems to be obsessed with Anki and flashcards. And
Okay. Yeah.
I learned better from flashcards. I love flashcards, but I don't have time to
Hmm.
try to take notes, do all the online
Yeah.
content, try to learn
Hmm.
stuff, and then do my. I just don't have physically the time in my week to do that.
Hmm.
So I tried to do it last year. It didn't work out great.
Hmm.
And sort of this year, I was like, right, I know sort of what works for me. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to like listen to people who say, oh, they got like
Yeah.
1,000 cards made that.
Yeah.
I just like, it just wouldn't
Yeah.
work for me time wise.
Yeah. I think it's you get very absolute statements in terms of what you should and shouldn't be doing. And I think it's good, to listen to what other people do because
Yeah.
you can always learn something. But I think you have to just, especially when you have such experience in your own education and learning, you have to look at it and say, actually, I do know how I learn best and see how exams go and, and adapt. But yeah, I find the militant Anki crew can be, yeah, I was definitely intimidated by it first, but I've actually never used Anki, which I think is a bit controversial in
I
the
don't
medicine study
know.
space.
Yeah, I mean, I did use it and I was using it last year, but I just didn't have time for it. Like,
Mhm.
and I mainly use at the moment osmosis, and I think they
Yes,
great like those
yes,
videos and
yeah.
like summary notes. I just really,
Hmm.
really love it. And I try to make like notes from that, and they have flashcards function as well. So I do
Hmm.
that on like spaced repetition, and
Yeah.
I found that like I've only sort of found that method like in the run up to May exams in first year.
Hmm.
And I listen to podcasts. Like it's like not
Hmm.
something that I even thought about like
Hmm.
myself, but I went into a drop-in session last year when I was like, oh, I really struggle like with time, but I know I have to like study. And
Hmm.
our clinical lead in first year said, well, what about listening to podcasts because you have two dogs and you said
Hmm.
you like walk quite a bit after you park your car to uni, etc. Like
Hmm.
what if you just put a podcast on?
Hmm.
And obviously it's not something that like I love listening to audiobooks and to music. It's not like every
Hmm.
time I go somewhere I'm going to put the medical podcast on. But I
Hmm.
found it really good to sort of like solidify a lot of the concepts and a lot of the topics that we learn.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
depends what works for you. And some people are like, oh, I wouldn't be able to do it or that. But I think it's important to like find what works for you, and it's different for everybody. So like you said, listening what works for somebody like is great because you might have not known about a resource
Hmm.
or about a way of doing things, and then you can
Hmm.
try it and see for yourself if it's for you, or if it
Hmm.
isn't. And if it isn't, then that's fine.
Yeah.
So-
Mm. So we actually had a question from someone about your romance novel and whether we could get a kind of synopsis or a kind of a little bit of a teaser of what your romance novel is about, if we're allowed to hear.
Uh, um, I can read you a blurb for it.
That would be wonderful.
I just have to find it.
Okay.
It's actually with a copy editor at the moment, so it's like finished and done. And
Wow.
I got a full request from my dream agent. So how it works, you can't really like majority of publishers, you can't just submit your novel to a publisher and be like, hey, I wrote a book, do you want to publish it? Majority of publishers don't take on unsolicited queries, so you have to try, if you want to publish like what's called traditionally through a publisher and not self-publish, you have to like try to find a literary agent, then they sort of work with you on your book to try to make it as marketable as possible, and then they submit it to publishers to see if any editors from publishing companies want to buy it. So it's a very scary process, and sometimes it takes ages. I know somebody who lives in Edinburgh, and her debut novel isn't coming out until June next year. It's been like a few years since she actually got the publishing deal. She's like finishing her she finished her third book now, and it's like the debut isn't out. It's out in Germany, and it had to be translated into German, and her second book is going to be out in Germany before her debut in the UK is going to be out.
Okay,
so it sometimes takes like years and years, but it's just it's and that was another thing, trying to learn all that and all the advices and like doing one-to-one sessions with literary agents, etc. That was something else I had to plan in my time. But anyway, I can read you the blurb for the book. Can't give the title, but so when Caroline married her childhood sweetheart, she thought it was the beginning of their forever. But 4 years later, her life in Glasgow is far from a fairy tale. At work, she isn't sure if she wants to continue with her chosen specialty or even give up on medicine altogether. At home, a secret her husband kept pushes them apart to separation. So when an opportunity comes along of spending a year in Oklahoma, Caroline takes it. Hunter shelved his dreams of becoming a veterinary surgeon when his father got sick. Now, back on a family ranch, he tries to keep it together for his family. He doesn't believe in love anymore. When Caroline and Hunter meet in a whiskey bar, sparks instantly fly. But can two broken hearts help each other heal? Is there more than one true love out there? And what kind of love is really enough? So it's sort of...
I'm in. I want to know what happens. I need to know.
So yeah, it's very sort of frustrating when you get to the point that especially when you get feedback that it's good. So I had like some beta readers and some published authors read it, and I'm very outgoing in a way that I don't have like much shame in like approaching people and trying to network. That's also something I learned in my job, and I think networking is so important in so many industries, because if it's not about like nepotism or something, but if you know somebody who knows somebody, you can sometimes learn about opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't even hear about. So I think it's very like wherever you sort of are, whatever industry, medicine as well, like putting yourself out there, like speaking to people and never burning any bridges. That's like another thing, because you never know who you're gonna meet in your professional personal life again. So yeah, but anyway, like once you sort of like hear from a lot of people that they really enjoyed it, and like you still get rejections from agents, and it's like just not for me, etc., because you sort of send 10,000 words. That's like sort of the 10,000 words, like a 1 or 1.5 page synopsis of like the whole, and synopsis is like a rundown, like a top line rundown of entire book, sort of with spoilers, so to say. It's like, no, like, oh, what's gonna happen? And a quick query letter, so like a blurb is part of the query letter. So yeah, it's sort of like, then you wait ages. That's like another thing, and then very often it doesn't amount to anything. But I'm quite impatient, so I started considering, and there's like a lot of pluses to self-publishing as well. So like, I don't like, a lot of people sort of look down on it, like, oh, self-publishing, but there's a lot of like pluses other than like keeping much better royalties from book sales after, to being able to have full creative control over the book, because once it gets bought, you don't really get, like, sometimes the title even can get changed, and obviously if you hate it, you can be like, oh, I hate it, that's not going to be my book. But often with the cover as well, like, they sort of come up with it, and then you just got to get it for approval, and if you absolutely hate it, well, they can change it. But other than that, like, obviously nobody's going to change your book. And but it's sort of like being a control freak. Like I
Yeah.
already have like an idea for like a cover for this book, and
Mm-hmm.
also like the pressure that once you get a publishing contract, it's like they would like you to, like, I don't know, do a book a year, for example, which seems to
Yeah.
be quite a thing.
Yeah.
Like in romance, like
Mm-hmm.
Emily Henry, for example, you get one book per year, and that like keeps the sort of
Yeah.
clocks going. And
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm really passionate about writing, and I already started writing second book, and I have ideas
Mm-hmm.
for more, and I really like want to continue writing, and I would love to get my books out there, I also want to be a doctor, like obviously.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to do both. And like I know that people say, oh, you can't have it, like you can't have everything, but I think like you can, like I enjoy writing, so I don't treat it like, oh, it's horrible. And I don't like,
Mm-hmm.
I worry a bit whether it wouldn't get to the point if I was like under pressure to like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on a deadline that is like imposed on me, whether that
Mm-hmm.
would be hard. And obviously with postgrad exams and even like the fifth, like the clinical placements, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
how much writing I would be able to do. But the traditional publishing is still the goal, so we'll
Yeah.
see.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny, as you described yourself as impatient, I was just thinking, wow, you've gone through so many processes that have taken really long times in between. Like, you must be so patient, was what I was
No.
just thinking. And then you came out and said, I'm very
No.
impatient. So I suppose it shows that you, even if you do feel like you're an impatient person, perhaps you still can persevere at processes that take a long time. That's
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, I'm definitely perseverant and stubborn, but I am impatient. And like my husband
okay,
always laughs at that I'm like the most impatient person he knows, because
okay,
I
okay.
sort of like sometimes, you know, like let's say query letter to an agent, I send it and I'm like, I didn't get a response. He's like, it's only been like a week, and it says like
Yeah,
up to 12 weeks, you know, it doesn't
yeah,
mean that they hate it. It's
yeah,
sort of
okay.
all that. But I think a lot of that is as well um, the anxiety disorder, like
Hmm.
sort of, you know, when you're waiting for something very long time, a lot of like self-doubt and a
Hmm.
lot of like thoughts of like, well, that's not gonna happen, like.
Hmm.
But I don't know, I actually started to like, I deal with it the way that I just like think, well, if it doesn't happen, that's like the worst thing, like the worst thing that they can, for example, say is no. And
Hmm.
as I said before, it's like the world won't end, like there are
Hmm.
worse things happening, and you can always
Hmm.
like find another option or do
Hmm.
something else.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's like where perseverance comes in. And if somebody like, you know, like I always think though that like pushing at something just for the sake of pushing at something, if it doesn't serve you anymore, or if it
Hmm.
doesn't bring you any joy, just because you started something,
Hmm.
then that's not great. Like my husband was doing teacher training. He always
Hmm.
wanted to be a secondary geography teacher. That was like his dream. He did human geography at uni.
Hmm.
And sort of halfway through he quit of PGDE. It was just not for him. It
Hmm.
was too much bureaucracy, and it was just consuming his life. And he's now doing something completely different, and he really enjoys it. So
Hmm.
I think, you know, he could have stuck with it and could have
Hmm.
finished it, and, you know, did the full qualification the first year, etc. And like,
Hmm.
you know, that's fine. And I think that goes to medicine as well. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you get people who are like, oh, I hate it, but I'm gonna like
Hmm.
push through or something. Like
Hmm.
if you really, really hate it and you're 100% sure this is not what you want to do,
Hmm.
it's a bit of a waste of time to try to
Yeah.
just like push through
Yeah.
for the sake of pushing through. So
Yeah. So many wise lessons.
and no matter wise, but
Yeah.
just
So that brings us on. So a new thing we're trying to do this season is to pose a question to the community and for our next guest that's going to come up. So it felt very right, obviously, to have like a literary question. And what we came up with was, if you could read any book again for the first time, which book would it be? So that's what we're posing to everyone out there. And we talked about what that book would be for you. And I thought that was a really lovely story. So I'm not sure if you want to share that with
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, so for me, it would be Pride and Prejudice,
Mhm,
because not being a native English speaker, I sort of, when I started learning English, it wasn't as sort of good the level to read books, and I was able to manage a lot of sort of contemporary books quite easily when I was a teenager.
mhm,
But I really wanted to do Pride and Prejudice, and there was sort of a lot of things that I wasn't able to read
mhm,
properly. And yes, I could have
mhm,
read the translation, but I'm weird like that, and I didn't want to.
mhm,
So
mhm,
even though now I can read it and really properly enjoy it, because my English is much better than it was, and like
mhm,
modestly saying, but I already like know what happens, and I've seen the movies, etc. And like I read bits and
mhm,
bobs like earlier with the book. So if I wish I was able to like take it now and not know
mhm,
anything about it, and like really enjoy it for what it is.
mhm.
So
Yeah, no. So I think mine is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig.
it was
Not sure, have you read
amazing.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just one of those books that I read at just exactly the right time. It doesn't always happen, and it's a great book at any time, but when you just think, and I think that has a lot to do with it as well, is the time you find that writing. So yeah, I like it. I think that would be my one. So I encourage everyone to join the conversation and share their books and their reasons if they feel comfortable to, and then we'll ask that to our next guest. So that leaves me to just say thank you so much for your time today. We've had a great chat about really a long time of your life, starting at your first degree and then moving through now to a goal that you've been working on for a long time and shown huge amounts of, I would say, patience, whether you agree or not, and perseverance to get there. And I'm really excited for you now that you're in this place and you've got the scope to enjoy the degree. And I'm very excited to read your book once it comes out. I'm already in. I already need to know what happens. So thank you so much, and I'll link your kind of your social media, um, so people can follow your journey if they want to, and we can always, if people want to send in questions, then I'm sure we can have a look at those as well. So thank you ever so much. And if people haven't followed our social media, our Instagram already, or followed the YouTube page, we'll be doing some spotlights now. We're doing the rest of season 3, so that would be great if you could do that, and I hope to catch everyone soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was lovely chatting with you.